What is up? What is going on? Holy crap. Too many upsets, too many freaking unpredictable endings. But we are back for another episode of OC and TJ, aka the O'Callahan Show, the Colin O'Callahan Show. Oh my god, I can't even talk. The Colin O'Callahan Show, I should say, aka Dialed In, because holy crap, there are so many freaking weird and wild games that, just yeah, let me just share the screen because this is just getting ridiculous at this point. Um, Obviously, like normally, I would do a show on a Thursday or a Wednesday, but given the fact that my schedule is completely busy this week, I figure what, might as well get this out of the way now before I forget. And let's before I get into the schedule, we're gonna look at the two teams that are on the bye. I'm not gonna like break down their games yet because I'm gonna save that for when the teams that they beat or that they lost to in this case. I'm going to pretty much talk about that game, later on. But Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills will have the week off. And to be quite honest, they definitely need it. Baltimore Ravens, they're 1-5. But the good news is, they might get Lamar Jackson back. They might get Roquan Smith back. They're starting to get a little healthier, but they are 1-5. They have the same record as the Cleveland Browns, which is just flat out atrocious. And the only reason why they are in last place is because of the tie break. And honestly, when you look at the rest of their schedule, it's obviously there are winnable games here, but they're probably going to have to like run the table for them to make the playoffs. And I think they can because they got Chicago, the Miami, the Minnesota, the Cleveland, and the Jets. Got the Bengals twice in 3 weeks, but you also have Pittsburgh, you got New England, Green Bay, and then Pittsburgh again. So obviously, we have a long way to go before we figure out, how the AFC playoff picture is officially going to shape out. But like I said, Ravens are going to need to play perfect for the rest of the way. And the Buffalo Bills, they just lost on Monday Night Football to the Atlanta Falcons on the road. They had 2 great touchdown drives to begin both halves, yet Josh Allen only threw for 180 yards with 2 interceptions. The defense got torched for 210 yards on the ground. They also gave up 250 to Michael Penix Jr. And the consequence for them, and the biggest reward for me as the Patriots fan, let's see if I can zoom in. Look at this. Look at this. First place in the division. How in God's name did that freaking happen? But I mean, in all seriousness, listen, Bills have been absolutely cautionary on both sides of the ball. Offense has been sloppy. They've been turning the ball over lately. They've gotten in their own way with penalties. I mean, the first play of the game, Bijan Robinson coughs up the ball. Yet Greg Rousseau, who's probably their best pass rusher, jumps off sides, and it completely, gives Atlanta the break that they needed to go right down the field. And if you look at their schedule coming after the bye, you got winnable games. I mean, you got the Panthers. Then you have to play the Chiefs. But, when it comes to the regular season, Josh Allen just normally finds a way to win. Miami, I'm not really too worried about that. But then you got Tampa, Houston, Pittsburgh, Cincy, Patriots again, then Cleveland and Philly and the Jets. I mean, listen, worst comes to worst, if they don't win the division, there's no question that they're making the playoffs. Heck, Buffalo probably still could win because the only reason why they are even in second place in the first place is because they lost to New England. So they probably are going to have to rely on them falling apart or losing a few, costly games just for Buffalo to get back in the picture. But we'll see how it unfolds there. I'm going to stop rambling. Let's just get into the freaking AFC Thursday night showdown between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals. The 6th division rivalry game in the last 7 showdowns, which means we're going to get one of two things. Either this is going to be a really close game that comes down to the wire, or, it's going to be like last week, and the Giants are just going to absolutely trample, the Philadelphia Eagles. Or in this case, the Bengals do that to the Steelers. Honestly, I'm expecting a closer game, but I call me crazy. I actually think that the Cincinnati Bengals are capable of pulling off the upset for one reason only. Since Mike Tomlin has been the head coach, they are 0-6 on Thursday Night Football against division rivalry teams on the road. Pittsburgh is obviously coming off a 23-9 victory against Cleveland. I mean, they didn't play completely lights out, but, offense, they were efficient. They didn't turn the ball over. Aaron Rodgers had well over 200 yards and a couple touchdowns. They ran the ball decently. I mean, DK Metcalf was hard to cover. They didn't give up a single sack. So Pittsburgh's offense, they just had a very clean, methodical, balanced performance. And and their defense, they sacked Dylan Gabriel 6 times and didn't give up a single touchdown. So as long as they could generate enough pressure, they didn't force a turnover, but as long as they generated enough pressure and as long as, they kept Cleveland, out of reach for as long as possible, then they were going to get out of it. And that's exactly what they did. Pittsburgh didn't get off to the best start. They only scored 9 points in the first half, thanks to 3 field goals made by Chris Boswell. But offense, they were the ones that got in the end zone. And from that point on, they just pulled away. The Cincinnati Bengals, they are coming off a pretty deflating defeat against the Cincinnati Bengals, or against the Green Bay Packers. Actually, I shouldn't even say it's deflating. Their hopes have been deflated since the minute Joe Burrow got hurt. They had somewhat of a respectable second half. They had a 17-play touchdown drive to start. Then they kicked a field goal. Then they had another touchdown. But the problem for them was that their offense was flat out putrid, through the first 30 minutes. I think Joe Flacco only had 40 passing yards. They still could have run the football. They're one of the worst rushing teams in NFL history, and they're dead last, running the football this season. Defense, they got absolutely wrecked in the entire second half, which is kind of ironic because on the opening drive, Geno Stone came up with a pretty opportunistic interception that, in normal circumstances, it would pretty much give them the energy and the boost that they need to, kind of play scrappy and have a competitive ball game. But offense, like I said, they couldn't do anything with their chances. They got completely neutralized in the first half. And while they did show positive flashes after halftime, defense couldn't get a stop when they needed to, and they put themselves in too big of a hole for them to, try to come back to win. So Jordan Love was solid. Josh Jacobs was just a madman, and, Green Bay was just a better team, bottom line. But having said all of this, though, I actually think that the Bengals are perfectly capable of pulling off an upset. Obviously, their defense is flat out atrocious, so there's no question that Aaron Rodgers is most likely going to have a solid performance. And honestly, I've been wrong with almost every primetime showdown over the last 2 weeks, so I'm probably jinxing Cincy here. But listen, if Jameis Winston could beat the Steelers on Thursday Night Football in the snow and outplay Russell Wilson, who was, 9-2, 10-2 when that game happened, and the Cleveland Browns are just outright terrible, then I don't know how Joe Flacco, who's still pretty decent. I'm not saying he's great, but I think he could be pretty, decent when you need him to be, with Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson, and T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson on the other side. I should point that out. I think that, Cincy could be a little scrappy. And also, Pittsburgh always finds a way to lose that one game against a very, very inferior opponent. And not only let them hang around, but, give them an opportunity to win the game and let them succeed. So, with that being said, I'm going to pick the Bengals to win this game 23-17. Now we are going to take things over to London in Wembley Stadium, if I'm not mistaken, also known as the second home, the unofficial second home of the Jacksonville Jaguars, as they welcome the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams beat the Baltimore Ravens 17-3, and honestly, I wasn't too impressed with how they played. I know that Puka Nacua suffered an ankle sprain, and he's one of their most dynamic weapons, and Matthew Stafford couldn't really, have him contribute the way that you would normally expect from him. But Baltimore Ravens, 2 things got in the way from them: turnovers, which is not shocking, and failed 4th down attempts. I mean, look what happened on the final drive of the first half. They get to the 1-yard line. 2nd down and 3rd down, they run a quarterback sneak with Mark Andrews under center. Listen, Todd Monken, he has definitely helped Lamar Jackson, thrive as a passer. But some of the play calling decisions over the last few years have been absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, it started all the way back to the AFC Championship against the Kansas City Chiefs when they decided just to not run the football and make Lamar Jackson play hero ball, which completely backfired. And now it's continuing over the last couple years or so, especially now with Lamar Jackson hurt, Derrick Henry, not normally the same, although he did have a pretty good game on Sunday. And, you don't really have an identity at this point. Obviously, injuries play a big factor in that, but listen, all the Rams had to do was just, screw up the rest of the way, and they did, but it was tied at 3 at halftime because of a doink 26-yard field goal and a strip sack by John Jenkins. The Rams, they got out to a better start to begin the second half. They went right down the field. They scored a touchdown. They went up 10-3. And to be quite honest, that was really the bare minimum. And then Zay Flowers, he fumbles the football on the screen, and the Rams fall on top of that one. And I think it was Nathan Landman that, got his hands on it. And, LA, to their credit, they capitalized. Kyren Williams got wide open in the flat for a touchdown. But I'm looking for my game notes here if I can find it, because it wasn't even that great of a game. The Ravens were 2 for 6 on fourth down, and the crazier part about it, they won the time of possession 38-22. They turned it over 3 times. They were 0 for 3 in the red zone, but what let the Rams hang around, or the reason why the Rams let the Ravens hang around, was because they were 2 for 5 in the red zone and 1 for 2 on fourth down. Stafford only had 181 yards. I mean, there wasn't really too much to take away from it besides the fact that the Ravens are absolutely depleted. Cooper Rush does not inspire confidence. He actually ended up getting benched in that game for Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley, who got sacked 4 times. And really, it was more of a defensive showing than anything because, like I said, the Ravens are just flat out lifeless at this point. The Jaguars, they're coming off a pretty, deflating loss as well because they lost 20-12 at home against the Seattle Seahawks. Sam Darnold was a baller. He had 295 yards with a couple touchdown passes. JSN completely torched them for 8 catches with 162 yards. And offensively, listen, Trevor Lawrence posted decent numbers. He had 250-plus yards with a couple touchdowns. Didn't turn the ball over. But 2 things held the Jaguars back. 7 sacks, and they couldn't run the football. Travis Etienne only had 27 yards on 12 touches, and the Jaguars were just flat out one-dimensional. They had an early lead. They went up 6-0. They had a few wide open passes that led to that point, that led to that touchdown to Brian Thomas Jr. Then Cam Little missed the extra point, and Seattle proceeded to score 20 unanswered points. And the minute that JSN got behind the defense for a 61-yard score against the recently acquired Greg Newsome in a trade for Tyson Campbell, then they just never lost momentum. They never kept their foot off the gas. And listen, Seattle didn't have the greatest second half. Offensively, they stumbled for a bit. The defense, they let the Jaguars get right back into the game. But to their credit, they never let the game get out of hand. And, the Jaguars, they just couldn't capitalize on the chances that they were given. So heavy pressure, can't run the football, and, defense didn't force a takeaway. As long as you don't turn the ball over against this Jaguars team, then you're gonna have as much momentum as you need just to barely scrape by. But having said all of this, I'm gonna pick the Jaguars to win because I don't really know what the Rams are gonna look like if Puka Nacua can't go this week. Because, he's the best player on their offense. Obviously, you have guys like Kyren Williams and Devontae Adams and Tyler Higbee. You got that kid, Jordan Whittington, who I think really needs to have a big game for them to, have a chance. The Rams defense, it's pretty solid. It's a pretty sturdy unit. It's just as opportunistic as the Jaguars, but I'm not sure. It could really go either way. I know the Rams are going to be better coached. Liam Cohen is actually going up against his former boss when he was, the offensive coordinator for the Rams a few years ago. But I would probably say, listen, I think, when it comes down to it, offenses are going to play well. The defenses are going to be sturdy. To me, it's not so much about who would screw up because Matthew Stafford and Trevor Lawrence are pretty capable franchise leaders. It's going to come down to who has the ball in their hands last and who's going to make the most out of their chances. Obviously, last week, that logic did not work for me because Sam Darnold definitely outplayed Trevor Lawrence from start to finish. But I would say that, on a London stage, Jaguars have, done really well up there. And, the Rams, they don't have that experience of, playing in international waters, unless I'm mistaken. I could be wrong. Unless it's like completely sidetracking me. At least in London, I actually can't remember the last time they were there. Besides 2019, if I'm not mistaken, when they played Andy Dalton and the Cincinnati Bengals. But I digress. I'm going to pick the Jaguars to win that game. Let me see what I had for a final score. 24-20. Okie dokie. Now we get into Sunday afternoon's festivities. We got the Bears versus the Saints. Well, the Chicago Bears got their comeuppance against the Washington Commanders just last night, actually, on Monday Night Football. And it came down to a 38-yard field goal by Jake Moody. I know, completely crazy myself. I mean, Jake Moody went from completely having his confidence destroyed with the San Francisco 49ers to being the unsung hero for the Chicago Bears because Cairo Santos was rolled out due to a thigh injury. Obviously, the Chicago Bears, they won the same score as they had the last game they played in against the Las Vegas Raiders. But being quite honest, the way that they won this game was almost as similar as the one they had against the Raiders. The defense forced 3 turnovers, interception by Brisker, forced fumble against Krosky Merritt, and then you had the very bad handoff from Jaden Daniels that set Chicago up in great field position to go right down the field to kick the game-winning field goal. But the Bears pretty much did little to nothing with the chances they were given, particularly in the second half. Now, to start the game, they were actually off to a pretty solid start. They were up 13-0 after the first 3 drives, but Washington ended up, getting right back into the game. They scored a touchdown. Their defense forced a 4th down stop after Caleb Williams nearly threw an interception to Rome Odunze. Their special teams blocked a field goal that allowed the Washington Commanders to not only take the lead, but, go ahead by 8 points. Final drive of the game, or the ensuing possession after that, I skipped a step. After the Commanders went up 24-16, DeAndre Swift gets wide open for a 55-yard touchdown. Defense gets a stop with the 2-point conversion. So you're still up by 2 points, and all you really need are a few more first downs for Chicago to burn their final timeouts and run out the clock. Then the fumble happened, and, to Chicago's credit, they capitalized on the opportunity they were given. They took advantage of the chance they had, and, that's why they're 3-2, and that's why they have a better record over the Washington Commanders right now. The Saints, once again, had a chance to win, had a chance to pull off an upset, but they couldn't seize momentum when they had the chance. The only time that they didn't do it and they lost was against the Seattle Seahawks in week 3. Last week against the Giants, 5 turnovers really got them over the hump, and they were able to win by 12 points. The Patriots, they did not do that whatsoever. They didn't turn the ball over. They did have that horrible snap to Garrett Bradbury on 4th and 7, which I don't even know why the Patriots were even going for that position. But really, this was nothing different than, I've seen from them over the last 5 weeks or so. I mean, the Saints, they had a few decent scoring drives. They got a touchdown. They had a couple leads. Yet in the second half, they only scored 3 points while their defense was actually doing everything they could to keep the game within reach. So I honestly can't blame the defense too much, even though they let Drake May throw 3 touchdowns and over 260 yards. Which, by the way, Drake May is the top 5 quarterback. I'm going to get into that in just a second. But the Saints offense, they didn't do too bad moving the football. First play of the game, boom, 53-yard shot to Chris Olave. It was just scoring. They couldn't score the points that they needed to completely stay ahead of the chains, to completely establish the momentum from start to finish. And, when they had the chance to close the deal and finish the job, they failed. So that's why I'm going to pick the Bears to win this game. It's going to be scrappy, and it's going to be ugly, and it's going to be feisty. Like, the Saints are just the team that, will not go away, which is honestly really refreshing considering, how awful they were last year. But I think the Bears, listen, they're at home. Dennis Allen revenge game against, his former team, the one that fired him in the middle of the season last year. So that they're going to be just this juiced. Bottom line, it's just Caleb Williams over Spencer Rattler. That is it. It's going to be ugly because the Bears have not had an easy win in such a long time, but, we'll see what happens. So, Bears win 26-18. Now we get to this ugly showing. The Dolphins versus the Browns. The fact that both teams only have one win entering this game is just flat out. It's just a travesty, to be quite honest with you. At least the Browns, they're just predictably bad. The Dolphins, they just can't get out of their own way. Think about how that game was against the Chargers on Sunday. First pass attempt of the game. Jalen Waddle drops an easy pass that gets intercepted by Tony Jefferson. Yet the defense forced 3 field goals. They didn't give up a single touchdown in the first half, and Miami actually led. They were up 13-9 thanks to Devon Achane having an outstanding 49-yard touchdown run. So it felt okay, as long as the Dolphins, just don't screw up to start the second half, and as long as, they continue to, get in a groove on both sides of the ball, they actually might have a chance at this thing. But Justin Herbert, he got the ball to start the third quarter. They go boom, 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 touchdown. And then 2 plays later, Tua throws an interception right to Benjamin St-Juste. All of a sudden, they're down 26-13 early in the fourth quarter. I mean, the Miami Dolphins, that quarter alone was the biggest reason why I think the Dolphins lost that game. But in the fourth, they woke up on both sides of the ball. The Dolphins had 2 straight touchdown drives to take the lead, a 1-point lead, but defense, they gave Justin Herbert a lot of time, and it didn't take too long before Herbert escaped the sack, found Ladd McConkey open down the sideline, juked past the defender, and take off for an incredible 42-yard catch and run to set up an easy chip shot for Cam Dicker. Chargers win. Dolphins are 1-5. Yeah, I pretty much summed that up real quickly, but the Dolphins are just. Oh, and to top it all off, I didn't even mention this. Last play of the game, boom, Tua threw his 3rd interception right to Derwin James. And it was just a desperation play at that point. So the fact that both teams are winless now, I'm going to put it to you like this. Whoever loses this game, whichever team loses this game, their head coach is gone after this year. Their head coach is gone after that week. I know that's a bold take, and I don't like calling for other people's jobs, but Kevin Stefanski, this team is in real hot water over the last 2 years. Obviously, he was not the one that, vouched for the Deshaun Watson trade. Yet, at the same time, they brought him there for offense. It has not been good over the last 2 years. It's actually been one of the worst in football in that stretch. And then you look at the Miami Dolphins, they have no leader. There's literally no leadership whatsoever. You got your quarterback throwing teammates under the bus for showing up late to meetings or not even showing up to them at all. You got Mike McDaniel calling him out publicly for those comments. There's no voice. There's no accountability. There's no responsibility. I know I was being redundant with that, but somebody has to step up for this football team. And no matter what given week it is, the minute that they screw up at any point in the game, they just have no energy. They have no hope. They have no inspiration to do anything whatsoever. And that's why they're in the predicament whatsoever. I'm not even going to pick the Dolphins to win this game. I actually think the Cleveland Browns have a real good shot at pulling off this upset. Number 1, they're home. 2, I actually like their defense a lot more than I do Miami's. And 3, I know, vouching for Dylan Gabriel over Tua is, a little bit blasphemous at this point. But to go back to my earlier point, the Browns defense has a lot of transcendent playmakers that can disrupt the game at any given time. You got Myles Garrett, number 1, Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit. You got Carson Schwarzenegger, who is balling out right now, the rookie out of UCLA. And the Dolphins, all you have are Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Zach Sealer, Jack Jones, Minka Fitzpatrick. I mean, what depth? Where's the depth? And now I'm speechless. I really am. So, Browns, I'm picking you to win this week, 24-20. You're welcome. Or, whatever. Okay. Now let's get to a little bit more of a fun matchup to talk about. Or I shouldn't even say fun because we know this is going to be a blowout. The Patriots versus the Titans. New England is first place in the AFC East. Drake May is playing like a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. And I know It's a hot take. I mean, I've seen a lot of, segments on First Take and, Get Up. Is Drake May the best quarterback in this draft class? I'm not going to go that far yet because I think Jaden Daniels, the rookie year that he had last season, it definitely is now one to forget. And we got to see what the Patriots are able to do, throughout the rest of the season. But May has only thrown 2 interceptions. He has 10 touchdown passes. He's fifth in passing yards. He's got one of the highest passer ratings. He's second in completion percentage. And he's doing this behind a pretty, underachieving offensive line. He's been sacked the 4th most times in the league, despite the amount of changes that they made to that front 5. And to be quite honest, I think they would have had a lot more points on Sunday against the Saints if it weren't for a couple of phantom push-off calls, because those were flat out atrocious. But New England still won. The Saints, like I said, they could have taken advantage of any of their opportunities down the stretch when they needed to win it the most. And, New England, they were just flat out dynamic in the first half. They kind of somewhat stumbled in the second, but their defense, they held its ground. They forced the only turnover of the day. And, like I said, at the end of the day, they never lost momentum. So I'm happy for that. The Titans, I really don't know what rock bottom for them is anymore, because last year they clinched the number 1 overall pick. They drafted Cam Ward. Now they're 1-5. Their offense is flat out horrible. They've given up the most sacks out of any quarterback in the National Football League. Their defense is okay, but it can only do so much when it's on the field so long. They barely have any talent in the skill position room. And to make matters worse, they just fired their head coach, Brian Callahan. They promoted their interim, Mike McCoy, to be their head coach. Holy crap, this is just a flat-out dumpster fire that they're in right now. Listen, Brian Callahan deserved to lose his job. The offense has been a travesty over the last 2 years. That was supposed to be his forte. That's why he got the job in the first place. You got players, voicing out, their harsh opinions that, they've had terrible weeks of practice. And if you listen to Brian Callahan in the press conferences, you could just tell he was way in over his head. The decision-making was flat out questionable. He didn't have the leadership skills. He didn't have the cachet to really, bring his team along for the ride. And now they're welcoming back Mike Vrabel, former head coach that they threw under the bus in a power struggle, whose team is now first place in their division and are poised to make the playoffs. 34-13. Let's just freaking move on. The Chiefs versus the Raiders. Kansas City looked like themselves again on Sunday Night Football. They beat the Detroit Lions 30-17. Patrick Mahomes was phenomenal. The Chiefs offense looked like the unit that, we were all used to seeing, over the last 6 or 7 years. Defense, they looked more connected and they looked, more in sync than they'd been all season. They only gave up 17 points to one of the more balanced units in the National Football League. They did kind of get a little bit of a break on the opening drive when Jared Goff was flagged for illegal motion on a direct pass attempt to him, in which he nearly lost control of the ball, but was able to rip it away and get over the goal line for the touchdown. But, the Detroit Lions, they still had a couple of leads. They were up 10-6. Defense was able to force a 4th down stop to give Detroit a chance to go ahead by double digits. But Amon-Ra St. Brown on 4th and 2, he dropped a wide open pass over the middle that gave the Chiefs the break that they needed. And not only did Kansas City score in only 2 minutes, but from that point on, they just never trailed. I mean, the Lions did whatever they could to try to keep it close, but, it really came down to who wanted it more and who was able to, take more punishment. And the Chiefs were, just absolutely, you could just tell they were seething from last week's loss, that they were 2-3, that they completely fallen out of the playoff hunt, that everybody was writing them off, that everybody had the hot takes and, the witty puns about, Taylor Swift or what have you. And, they took out their anger and all their energy on, the Detroit Lions, who were considered to be the best team in the National Football League at that point. And Brian Branch definitely had a bit of a problem with how bad they looked, because towards the end of the game, he decided to get into a bit of a brawl with Juju Smith-Schuster, and he got suspended for 1 game as a result. It was fitting, it was deserving, and it was just flat out childish and immature. So, honestly, the Chiefs were just a better football team that night, and now they're at home against the Raiders team that honestly just had to do the bare minimum against the Tennessee Titans to win. All it really took was a strip sack from Devin White for the Raiders to score their first touchdown of the day. And from that point on, I mean, the Titans just had no juice or energy left in the tank. I mean, you heard Jeffrey Simmons. If you heard Jeffrey Simmons, at the end of the game, that just told you everything you needed to know about that football team. They had a terrible week of practice, which honestly should not be the case considering that they literally had just gotten their first win road against the Arizona Cardinals, and yet you couldn't even beat a Raiders team whose quarterback is leading the league in interceptions with 10 now, who really only relies on Ashton Janey and Brock Bowers, who is still out with that knee injury, whose defense is literally only one guy in Max Crosby, yet the Raiders sacked Cam Ward 6 times on Sunday afternoon. And now they're going on the road to Arrowhead Stadium to play the Chiefs, who are just by far the vastly superior football team here. And a few more stats to bring up for the Titans. 3 for 13 on third down, 225 total yards, 3 turnovers. And like I said, Raiders didn't really have to do too much of anything. There was the bad pick by Geno to Cody Barton, but outside of that, listen, they ran the ball decently. They didn't do too much throwing the football, but they looked a hell of a lot better than Tennessee did. And the only touchdown that they gave up was in garbage time. So I'm not completely sold on them. I mean, I'm not going to take too much stock, but kudos to them. They finally ended their 4-game losing streak, but they're probably going to get absolutely destroyed by the Chiefs, 37-13. I feel like the Chiefs, they're starting to get their swagger back on both sides of the ball. Obviously, I don't want this to be a trend where they just, look great one week and then completely falter the next. But considering that they're at home, and they're right back in the playoff hunt, while the Raiders are just a very subpar team at best. All the Chiefs really have to do is keep their foot on the gas, stay ahead of the chains, and, that's just about it. I feel like I'm being I feel like I'm just saying crap over and over again. But now we get to the Eagles and the Vikings. Vikings are coming off a bye, but dear Lord, the Eagles are they're going through it right now. They really are. Actually, all of Philadelphia is going through it. I mean, the Phillies choked to the Dodgers. The Eagles got wrecked by the Giants on Thursday Night Football. The Flyers lost their home opener to the Florida Panthers. The 76ers might as well be down bad because their best player is never healthy. Now they're going on the road to play the Minnesota Vikings. And to be quite honest, I can't even guarantee that the Eagles are going to win that game. They should, because they're more stacked on both sides of the football. But at the same time, their offense is ineffective. They have no identity. Their play caller is absolutely atrocious. It's honestly shocking that Kevin Patullo is still in charge on the headset. The defense is starting to, wear out a little bit. They gave up a lot of big plays. They let Cam Scatterbo run for 3 touchdowns and close to 100 yards. Jackson Dart was flat out phenomenal. He had 200 total yards of scrimmage with a couple scores himself. And the crazy part about that game was that his 2 top receivers that day were Wan'Dale Robinson and Lil Jordan Humphrey. Yeah, that should tell you everything you need to know about the Eagles right now. And, they've lost 2 in a row now. I mean, they choked against the Denver Broncos at home. Then on a primetime stage, they got completely outplayed by a rookie quarterback, a rookie running back, a head coach that was literally on the hot seat entering the season, along with the general manager. And listen, defense is starting to improve. Brian Burns is having a phenomenal season. He's got 7 sacks now, which is just, I think that's second in the league now, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, no, that game just said way more about the Eagles' flaws than it did about, the Giants' strengths. And here's the other crazy part about this. I mean, defense gave up 3 scores on the first 4 drives. The Eagles' offense actually looked respectable through the first 30 minutes, but then on the first few drives of the second half, you had the overthrow to Devontae Smith by 6 yards. That would have been a wide open 89-yard touchdown. And then when Philadelphia had a chance to make it a one-score game again, Jalen Hurts, he predetermined the out route to Jahan Dotson. Cordell Flott saw that. He jumped it. It took an interception all the way down to the sideline. That should have been a pick six, but allowed the Giants to put the game away 34-17. And now that the Vikings are coming out 2 weeks rest at home, I don't really know if the Eagles could win this week. I feel like even with the Minnesota Vikings quarterback situation, you still have Justin Jefferson. Jordan Mason is a pretty decent back. You got Jordan Addison, Jalen Nailor, TJ Hawkinson, and your defense is one of the best units of football. And Philadelphia on both sides have just not looked as strong or as dominant as they were the year before when they won the championship. So I think the Vikings are going to pull off the upset here. We'll see who's starting between J.J. McCarthy or Carson Wentz. But my final score, 27-17. And it's all because Philadelphia's offense is flat out trash. They're absolutely garbage. So, speaking of trash, the New York Jets, who host the Carolina Panthers at home on Sunday afternoon. I don't even know what to say. I really don't. Where do I even begin? First of all, Justin Fields had his worst game of his career by far. 9 of 17 for 45 yards. 45. Got sacked 9 times. Their game plan of run the ball to Brees and throw the ball to Garrett Wilson completely backfired, predictably backfired. And they didn't score a single touchdown the entire afternoon. Yet the defense and the special teams did everything they could to put themselves in a position to win that football game. I mean, think about it right here. Opening drive. Denver gets the ball to start. The Jets finally forced a takeaway. Their first one of the whole season. The Jets went 3 and out, kicked the field goal. Next drive. Huge 72-yard return from Ken Nwanu. Set up in tremendous field position. 3 and out, field goal. Okay. Second half. Holding in the end zone. Gives the Jets the freaking lead. They were up 11-10. The offense didn't do anything about it. They did nothing about it. Bo Nix in the second half. You want to know what his numbers were? Hold on. Let me pull up my notes here because I made sure to write this down. You want to know what Bo Nix's stats were in the second half? 4 of 10 for 49 yards. 4 first downs, 1 for 6 on third down, 71 total yards of offense. Like, Denver was literally doing everything they freaking could just to be like, here you go, Jets. Take this win. You couldn't do it against the Cowboys. We'll let you have it, even though our defense is playing lights out. And yet Fields was absolutely hot garbage. 8 first downs, 2 for 15 on third down, 82 total yards of offense. 30 seconds left in the first half. Eric Glenn just doesn't do anything. They have no timeouts. Offense just stays there on the field. No urgency on the sideline. You could just see Eric Glenn look like. Garrett Wilson definitely had some words with him at the end of the first half. There's no leadership. There's no passion. There is literally no confidence. Justin Fields doesn't even want to freaking throw the football anymore. And now it's apparent that, Garrett Wilson is on the injury report and he might miss some time. They're screwed. Their team is they're trash. They're terrible. And I'm trying not to curse here because I'm trying to make this a clean show, but it's very freaking hard to right now. Carolina Panthers, on the other hand, they just beat the Cowboys at home and they're 3-3. Obviously, all 3 of their wins are at home, but nonetheless, they're a decent football team this year. I thought that this was going to be another one of those games where, they were probably going to play competitive enough, but they were going to get outplayed. And in the first half, they were trailing by 4. Bryce Young threw a pick. That wasn't his fault because Ted McMillan dropped it. But just like last week against Miami Dolphins, they got themselves out of the hole. Rico Dowdle got his revenge against the team that let him walk in free agency, had 230 total yards of offense, which has catapulted him to being the 5th leading rusher in the NFL. Bryce Young is actually having a pretty decent season. He has as many touchdowns this year as he did through the first 2 seasons of his career, he's got more touchdown passes than he did his rookie year. And the defense, they got their tails handed over to them. I mean, Dak Prescott was phenomenal. They could have stopped George Pickens, but they shut down the run. And in the fourth quarter, they forced a field goal and they forced a punt. And that was what the Carolina Panthers offense needed to stay in the game and take the lead with 6 minutes left to go. So I think, listen, I'm not saying that the Panthers are a great team, but hey, if they play more consistent and if they can win on the road or win more games on the road, then they're going to be a pretty decent team. I feel like they're going to have 7 or 8 wins at the most, but at the end of the day, it is a lot better than, where they've been, lately. So I think Carolina gets their first win on the road. Their offense is 10 times more dynamic. And listen, Eric Glenn might be, the stronger defensive mind in this scenario. Actually, I shouldn't even say that because the Jets defense is terrible. But the point is, the Jets defense has a little more talent to work with. I just think that the Carolina Panthers, they're motivated, they're hungry, but I just hope that they don't suffer an ultimate trap game and find a way to lose on the road yet again. So my final score is going to be low scoring. I don't know if both offenses are going to play extremely well, especially since it can be pretty cold and frigid in New Jersey during this time of the year. But I'll say the Carolina Panthers win 17-14. Now I think we're heading into the 4 o'clock slate. I think we might be. We got the Broncos and the Giants. Denver is going to need to have a way better performance than they did last week, especially offensively, because you got 2 of the NFL's leading sack guys in the National Football League. That didn't sound right. Let me start over. You got both teams have 2 of the top leaders in sacks. There we go. Nick Bonito and Brian Burns. Obviously, I don't think either of these offenses are going to put up more than 30 points in this one. But this is a huge test for the New York Giants right here because Denver specifically has one of the toughest home field advantages you can ask for. And it's pretty obvious why. Because of the elevated surfaces. So not only is Jackson Dart going to, be in for a tough test, when you take into account the natural surroundings, but he's going up against one of the best defenses in the National Football League, one of the best head coaches that the game has ever seen in Sean Payton, and an offense that, when it's right and when things are in a healthy state, can wreak a little bit of havoc. And obviously the Giants can do that as well because you have Cam Scatterbo and obviously Jackson Dart is just a flat-out stud. But if Denver can force like 1 or 2 turnovers, then that would be enough for them to, seize the rest of the momentum and not trail the rest of the way. So I think that because the Broncos are at home and because they have a way better defense and because their offense is a little more experienced with a little more continuity, I think that they're going to just escape with this one, 28-17. Colts versus Chargers. Indy is coming off a close win against the Arizona Cardinals. Their offense, they were up 14-10 at halftime. In the second half, they were just flat out unstoppable. Daniel Jones had 200-plus yards of offense with 2 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor was still a madman on the ground. He's proving that he's that he's having the best season out of any running back in the National Football League. But I got to tell you, the defense struggled against Jacoby Brissett. Obviously, they picked him off earlier in the first half, and the offense was able to take advantage of it. But third quarter, the Cardinals, they were down by 4 points to start the period. They had 2 straight touchdown drives to take the lead, and they kicked a field goal to go ahead 27-24 in the fourth. But to their credit, they forced the final stop of the game to survive 31-27. And, and right now they have the number 1 seed in the AFC. Who could have ever expected that? With the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens and even the freaking Houston Texans in their division. The Colts are the ones that could have home field advantage if the season ended today. That is just flat out astonishing. And I got to give a lot of credit to Shane Steichen because I thought he was going to get fired, but it looks like this team has rejuvenated confidence. Their offense is one of the best scoring units in the National Football League. The defense, while it's still a little bit of a weak spot, it's not as terrible as it was with Gus Bradley last year. And now they have a pretty solid chance to beat the Chargers because, listen, they were able to get out of their 2-week slump against the Dolphins, but they have not been consistent all season long. Or I shouldn't even say all season long, but over the last 3 weeks. First half, they don't score a touchdown. Third quarter, they look invincible. Fourth quarter, they blow the 13-point lead, and it takes one play and a walk-off field goal for them to barely escape by 2. I mean, the Chargers are at home, so I'm really tempted to just go with the home field advantage of this team. But listen, Colts have been one of the stronger teams in the National Football League this season, and they're going to keep it really close. But I think I'm going to give the Chargers the benefit of the doubt for now. But whoops, I kind of screwed that one up. But I still think that. But listen, I'm not going to be surprised if the Colts, find a way to pull off the upset here. But I'm still going to go with the Chargers in this one, 31-28. It really just comes down to the defense. While it hasn't been great over the last 2 weeks, I still think that with Jesse Minter calling the plays, it hasn't been completely god awful. But I'm a little worried about them. So if they get absolutely annihilated in this one, or if they get absolutely torched this game, then I'll start to have real concerns moving forward. All right, we got 2 more Sunday afternoon games. We got the Packers and the Cardinals. Cardinals, obviously, like I just said, Jacoby Brissett had a pretty solid showing, had 320 yards and a couple touchdowns, but, couldn't score on the final drive. They were down by 4 at halftime because of an interception, even though Daniel Jones also threw one. Arizona, they left a lot of points on the board in the red zone. That's probably the biggest reason why they lost that game in the first place. And the Packers just bounced back from the bye week and handled their business against a very downtrodden Bengals team. So I think now that the Cardinals are on a 4-game losing streak, I think the Packers are going to be in the exact same situation. And as long as they just don't get in their own way on either side of the ball, they'll be okay. So my final score for this one is going to be 26-17. Cowboys versus Commanders. Dallas obviously just lost to Carolina 30-27 because their defense is flat out god awful. And, offense in the fourth quarter. I don't like – here's the thing. When it comes to high-scoring games, I don't like to nitpick too much about what the offense didn't do. But when you know that your defense is horrible and that they can't stop a cold, the last thing that you can do is, A, turn the football over, and B, not get the points that you need on the board to officially pull away. In the fourth quarter, they settled for a field goal to tie the game. Okay, not bad. But in the next drive, they went 3 and out. 6 minutes left. Now, obviously, in a normal situation, you would expect the defense to force another stop themselves, right? And give Dak Prescott a chance to win in a 2-minute situation, but that's the problem. Defense couldn't get off the field. They got called for pass interference on the first third down of the possession. And then on 4th and 1, they let Hunter Renfrow get wide open. And they easily get right into field goal range. And Ryan Fitzgerald puts on the finishing touches to win 30-27. And the Commanders, on the other hand, turnovers just completely bit them in the butt. There was the interception near the end zone to Jaquan Brisker, the fumble by Ja'Cory Grosky-Merritt. And then on the final drive of the game, where all you needed were a couple first downs to force the Bears to burn their final timeouts and run out the clock. A fumble is created on a bad exchange, and the Bears go right down the field to kick a field goal. So let me think of this. Interception leads to a field goal. Fumble creates the touchdown. Last fumble sets up the game-winning field goal. Oh, so you don't turn the football over, you win the freaking game. Going on the road to play the Dallas Cowboys. And to be quite honest, I don't see this as a bounce-back win for the Commanders. I don't. For number one, Terry McLaurin's still not healthy. Deebo Samuel was very limited. He only caught 4 passes for 5 yards last week. The best receiver in the game was freaking Chris Moore. The best receivers were Chris Moore, Jalen Lane, and Luke McCaffrey, which obviously is not a healthy way to win football games if you're that football team. And obviously, the Cowboys defense is atrocious, but Dak Prescott is a top 5 MVP candidate. George Pickens has been one of the best receivers in the league so far, and he's doing this without CeeDee Lamb over the last 3 games. And Javonte Williams is 4th in the league in rushing. So Dallas's offense has been one of the best units of football, which is amazing because, Brian Schottenheimer didn't call plays the last 2 years, and he's finally, showing them that he was made for the job and that he really should have been the one in charge of that offense, when Mike McCarthy was there. So I like the Cowboys' chances of winning this game. It'll be really close because we all know Jaden Daniels and Dak Prescott are going to go toe-to-toe with one another. But I think in the comforts of Jerry world, I think that the Cowboys, they might show their true colors. I wouldn't even say true colors because that would imply that they're just going to, flat out get exposed and predictably break their fans' hearts again, which is not completely out of the norm, which is not completely impossible. But, yeah, I mean, I like the Cowboys in this one. I know the Commanders have better playmakers on their defensive side, but I think that this is going to be a pretty shocking upset if you ask me. So I'll say the Cowboys win 34-30. Now we get to the Sunday night game. We have the Falcons and the 49ers. Sunday Night Football. Levi Stadium. 4-2 versus 3-2. Okay, I'm going to stop stalling. The 49ers, they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 30-19. And listen, the bigger story from that game was that Fred Warner is out for the season with a dislocated ankle, which is a huge loss for them because if you saw the game last week, the minute he went out, that defense just could not stop anything, whether both in the run game and in the pass game. And keep in mind, Tampa was without Emeka Egbuka, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Bucky Irving, and 2 of their starting offensive linemen. So the fact that the 49ers defense got torched by that was just flat out concerning. But really the biggest reason why the 49ers lost was because their offense, they moved the ball extremely well, but not only did they only score 1 touchdown the entire afternoon, but 2 turnovers from Mac Jones just really gave Tampa Bay all the momentum that they needed to just stay ahead and not trail the rest of the way. They did give up 1 lead early in the second quarter, but Baker Mayfield was just flat out phenomenal. Let me pull up my notes here because the fact that he, was able to have that great of a game without any of his top, weapons at hand shows that he should be the MVP. Here we go. 256 yards, 2 touchdown passes. They won the time of possession battle 33-27, and they didn't turn the ball over. Actually, no, I'm looking at this wrong. 3 for 8 on third down, 352 yards, 2 for 2 in the red zone. Okay, but you had the wide open touchdown pass to Tez Johnson. You had another score from Cam Johnson, and after the interception to Kendall Vildor that should have been a pick 6, Rachaad White just, walked right down the field and gave Tampa Bay an early 7-0 lead. So turnovers, field goals instead of touchdowns, and, the defense, they got shredded. The Atlanta Falcons, on the other hand, were the exact opposite. As I mentioned earlier, at the top of the show, they ran for 210 yards thanks to Bijan Robinson. Michael Penix threw for 250 yards. They didn't turn the football over. And the defense, while they did let up a touchdown to begin both halves, only let up 180 yards to Josh Allen and picked him off twice and forced a critical 4th down stop. So Atlanta's defense has been surprisingly impressive this year. And, I'm really excited for them. I'm really hoping that they can, build on this instead of, suffer the same fate as they did last year. But I just hope that they're not an inconsistent team. Because if you remember, they started off by losing to Tampa Bay. Then they beat Minnesota at Minnesota on Sunday Night Football. The following week, they got shut out by the Panthers 30-0. Then they beat Washington. Then there was the bye, and now this happened. So I'm just hoping that, they don't get outplayed by a 49ers team on the road. But I like the Falcons' chances of winning. We don't know what's happening with Brock Purdy. We don't know if he's going to be healthy enough to play. My guess is that he probably is a little better now, still dealing with that toe injury. The good news for them is that they're getting George Kittle back, which is remarkable. But without two of your top defensive players and an offense that is still trying to, try to adjust not having, some of its top receivers at hand, I think the Falcons could definitely exploit some of those mistakes on the defensive side of the ball. And more importantly, I think their offense can, stick to the same formula they did last week and succeed off of that. So I'm going to pick the Falcons to win in a pretty close game, 23-20. Walk-off field goal from Parker Romo gets it done. Now we have two Monday night games. You got the Bucs and the Lions at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and then we have the Seattle Seahawks hosting the Houston Texans at 10 o'clock. Houston is coming off a bye, while the Seattle Seahawks are coming off an impressive win against the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road. Houston has not beaten the Seattle Seahawks, ever, if I think about it. I know they haven't won in Seattle, but obviously it's a limited history since the Texans have only been in session since 2002, but I think Houston's offense, they're going up against a pretty good Seahawks defense. And while Houston has not done so bad over the last 2 weeks against Tennessee and Baltimore, both of those teams are down in the weeds right now. And the Texans are going up against a pretty strong test in Seattle, who is looking like a surefire playoff contender. And the longer that Houston's offense stalls out, the better of a groove that the Seattle Seahawks offense can get in, because you've got Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's playing like a top 3 receiver in the league. They could run the ball well with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And the best part is, Sam Darnold has only turned the ball over 3 times, and he's only been sacked 7. Just flat out amazing considering how, bad that O-line has been over the last decade. And more importantly, the fact that Russell Wilson and Geno Smith had such low ceilings, yet at this point in time, the sky is through the roof when it comes to Sam Darnold. So I'm going to pick the Seahawks to win this game at home, 30-17. And now we get to the Bucs and the Lions. Tampa Bay, they're coming off an outstanding win over San Francisco at home. Baker Mayfield got his first career victory against that team and was flat out phenomenal. He shredded Robert Saleh's defense, mainly from start to finish. He did get off to a little bit of a slow start, but he was more acclimated as the game wore on. The defense sacked Mac Jones 6 times and picked him off twice. And they let up 12 of their 19 points came off of 4 field goals from Manny Pinheiro. So they were a bend but don't break unit for much of the afternoon. Whereas the Lions, like I said, defense got absolutely picked apart by Patrick Mahomes. And the offense, while it did had, a few promising scoring drives, they just, they had the opening drive in which they settled for the field goal after the illegal motion penalty. There was the drop by Amon-Ra St. Brown that really allowed the Chiefs to go off to the races. And, for much of the second half, they were just playing keep up because they were down by 10 for much of the game. And in the fourth quarter, that deficit increased to 13 because the offense just ran out of gas. So this is a huge game for both teams. Detroit needs a bounce back win to, reassert themselves at the top of the division, while the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need to show that, no, we're not going to be the same team that we've been over the last couple of years, where we, been respectable. We were able to win a very crappy division, but then we, predictably, got outplayed in the playoffs. I actually like the Bucs' chances of winning this game, if you really think about it, because offensively, they're still dealing with injuries, but the hope is that they'll get Mike Evans back. Defensively, their top corner, Zion McCollum, is starting to return. We'll see what happens with Chris Godwin. We'll see what the status is for Emeka Egbuka, along with Bucky Irving. But listen, if Baker Mayfield could win without any of those guys at hand, then I think against an injured Lions defense that doesn't have Terrion Arnold or DJ Reed, then I think that, I just think that they could continue to go on this, rampant start that they've been on and, continue to, thrive. And the Lions, offensively, they're well balanced. Jared Goff is playing like an MVP candidate, but it's just, I can't trust the defense, number one. And number two, if they give Tampa Bay any sort of breathing room with a turnover or a failed fourth down stop like they did last year, they are not going to win this football game. So I'm going to pick the Bucs to win 28-24. And with that, the Week 7 picks are officially locked. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. But before I go, I'm going to read some of these comments here. Browns on top. Oh, for the love of God. Yeah, they're gonna. I actually think they're gonna beat the Dolphins here because I mean it's just their defense is more aggressive and they can run the football extremely well, which Miami's defense can't really do. They're one of the worst rushing defenses in the National Football League. Explain why Tilly Gabriel. He's okay. I'll put it like that. Jim Schwartz will be the head coach next week, possibly. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to that. And then, of course, LFG. Can't tell if he likes the Cleveland Browns or not. I feel like he's a Steelers fan. But, all right, that just about does it. Like I said, make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. I'll be back next week. And, yeah, hope you guys have a great one.